Hey, welcome to another episode of Spilling the Beans. Today I'm sitting down with Bobby Oliver, who is a rock star member of Legacy Family, member of our mastermind, and she's an expert a lot in the entrepreneurial mindset, the entrepreneurial psychology, the entrepreneurial brain of how we work. She's got some cool scientific facts and things that she references a lot of times in the conversations that we're having. I'm going to ask her to share some of those with you guys of, how an entrepreneur, how we think, how we behave, how we make decisions, how we move through stress and things along those lines. So I'm excited to sit down with her, and I think you're gonna get a lot of cool, out-of-the-box thoughts in this episode. Bobby Oliver, how are you?
Hi.
We're gonna hug it out. Good to see you.
You too.
Thank you for coming in from Denver.
We
have very similar looking dogs, by the way.
Yes.
By the way.
That's the only reason I'm here, is to talk about our dogs.
And you're be hanging out with Oxford for the next couple of days, potentially. So good stuff. So I know you're here in order to film Legacy Wealth Academy. And really your course is heavily on, and your master class is heavily on like the entrepreneurial mindset and psychology behind it, and how entrepreneur brains are a little bit different, right? Better or worse than the majority of society, I would say. And so I want to dive into that. Before we get into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and how you became like, oh hey, my psychology is a little bit different, and kind of went down this journey in order to learn this stuff.
Absolutely. First off, so happy to be here, by the way. I gotta tell you, a few months ago, I was insanely shocked that you'd even acknowledge me. You said my name and I was like, oh my God, it's Tim Bratz. And here we are. I love it.
It's funny, it's amazing what social media can do of almost putting you up on a pedestal, and then and I'm just not that guy. You know, when people watch this or people watch the content or Commercial Empire or something, and then they meet me in person, they're like, dude, you're the same, or you just kind of hang out, you're like a normal person. I was like, yeah, I'm a normal person, right? I'm a normal,
I'm a normal guy.
Yeah, and I don't, it makes me weird when people put me up like that, but it's very, I don't know.
It's the blue check mark.
It's a big honor. Yeah, probably.
It's
got to be the blue check mark. It's got to be. But it's cool. I love it, and I love getting to meet people and hang out and then become good friends. So
yeah,
I'm excited that you're here.
I get that you're a normal guy now, so that pedestal, gone. You blew that.
Hey. Oh man, don't look up to him.
But yes, as far as my background goes, why I got so interested in this, I've built a few businesses my entire life. I think I started my first business when I was 7. I had a little chicken egg business.
I love that.
It was Bobby's Excellent Eggs.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
Oh, it was great. I'd sell eggs every week to different customers, call them up, ask if they needed refills, check them off, $2 a dozen.
Did you have your own chickens?
Yeah. Oh yeah, had my own chicken coop. Had to collect the eggs, had to clean them.
Feed the chickens. I love that.
Bought everything, had to do all the accounting for it.
Was that your idea, your parents' idea, or?
I grew up farming and stuff, and so, we had this space for it, and I just always loved making money.
Yeah.
And I think my parents knew that. And so, I did 4-H, which is where you county fair stuff, you know.
Yep.
Did the pigs, did that every single year, and I was like, well, hey, can I raise chickens? And I think it was as simple as the local little farm store was selling a bunch of chicks. And my parents were like, hey, you have the money. If you want to do this, we'll help you out a little bit, but you have to pretty much do everything.
Yeah, it's your responsibility.
Yeah. And I was like, wow, I'm really good at this. This is fun.
I love it.
And, started off doing that. But before that, I had a very rough background and a very rough childhood. I'm adopted. My actual parents were on drugs. My parents had a bunch of issues and stuff. I was taken from the hospital because they were so messed up. Went instantly into foster care, got adopted by some different people. All this stuff happened, right? And I always knew that things were just a little bit different. I couldn't just hang out with people. I had a different way of thinking, and I had a different way of going about things. I didn't like hanging out with people my age. I couldn't really relate to them the way that my friends could all relate to each other. And as I got older and I started building other businesses, I had a photography business when I was, in my mid-teens, 16, 17, through college. And I went through a lot of different challenges. And especially as I got older and older and I went through college, I realized more and more that I was just different. And I realize now that it's just the entrepreneur mindset, essentially, and the psychology and the brain. And so I started studying that. And then I started another business when I was 19, like 19, 20, and started like hanging out with people who were business owners and entrepreneurs. And over time, I just realized, like, hey, we all have really similar problems, but we can't talk about those problems with normal people, right? I can't say I have shiny object syndrome to someone on the street or to one of my best friends. Why is that? And I noticed there were like a few key elements to why. So for the past 5 or 6 years, I've been breaking down, okay, what's the actual psychology behind this? Why are entrepreneurs different? And first off, like, I'm not a fan of the word entrepreneur. I think it's a label, but it's what makes sense to people, right? And so I just started really looking into how are our brains different? And it turns out they're actually completely different, physically different from a normal brain.
Really?
Yeah, crazy.
So like I mean, a lot of the conversations that I have, obviously being in the coaching world and kind of stumbling into that because a bunch of us were just kind of lonely entrepreneurs, lonely business owners, right? And we didn't know, but like, hey, our parents couldn't help us out. They're not answering questions for us. You know, it's hard to talk about struggles in business with people who work for you because you're like, well, they're gonna bail if they don't understand that I have struggles, right? They're looking at me like I'm the one who should have their shit together. Yeah. And you know, maybe some of our friends just don't get it. They work in different industries or work at a different level. And I always felt isolated. I felt like I was like on an island of I'm just trying to figure it out myself. And if I don't figure it out, nobody's there to help me. And then I found myself like in a room of entrepreneurs, of business owners, like a mastermind group and networking groups and things like that, where, like you said, there was this, everything fell into a handful of categories. There was the marketing and sales, right? And questions about that. There was accounting and finance, a lot of questions about that. And then there was like the operations and human resources. And it was just different levels, right? Different levels of those same problems. And those key categories transcend industry. It didn't matter what industry you were in. It all got funneled down to one of those three things. And then all of a sudden you're in this room of other people and you realize that you can talk, you know, openly with them. And so I'm interested to like dive into some of that. Can we do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
I love that you acknowledge that too, because so many people are not self-aware, but they're also not aware of people around them. Like if you're very, you know, shut down and you're on your own, like you said you were and I was, and pretty much all entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, that different brain, you know, we think, oh, we're the only ones that think this way. It turns out there's a bunch of us. A lot of them are in legacy. A lot of them are in these bigger masterminds. A lot of them are trying to find, okay, what's more? Because I know that there's something way bigger than this. How do I get into it? And I was finally like, well, wait a minute. If I think that and this person thinks that, and so I started analyzing, okay, does everyone think that they're on their own? Because if so, we need to open this up a little bit. So I started diving into the psychology of it. And I found all these studies. Okay, this is gonna blow your fucking mind.
All right, I'm excited.
So this.
And by the way, we were talking, and I wanted to be a psychology major. That's why I liked psychology for business, and that's why I went for marketing when I was in college. And so like this stuff, I love this stuff. I always talk about psychology. A lot of my posts and videos are about psychology because I think that's the foundational element of having a successful business or successful life or successful marriage, successful parenting, successful friendships, all those kinds of things. All comes down to psychology, and the self-awareness is one of those things that the most successful people that I know are the most self and socially aware people.
Socially aware, that's a good way to put it, for sure. The analogy I like to use is imagine that you're a tree, right? So there's all these different branches, there's all these different elements, but it all starts with the seed, which is essentially your brain. That's your psychology. So if your seed has the right kind of soil, the right kind of sunlight, everything that it needs to be successful, it all starts with that. You know, people think, oh, I have this problem in my business, someone else must be the problem, right? And that's someone who's not self or socially aware. They think that it's an outward problem. And I love talking to people and breaking down, hey, why do you think that's a problem? Why do you think it's external? Did you ever think that maybe it has to do with you?
Yep.
Because your business is a direct reflection of you.
Yep.
And it trickles down.
Yep.
And the bigger the business, the harder it is to fix those problems.
What do they say? They say that successful people are the only ones who, I don't know what the hell it is, but they take responsibility over success and failures versus everybody else only takes their responsibility over success, right?
Absolutely. Taking accountability in all areas. Because if you only focus on the good, if you flash that, put a flashlight on the success, these failures are just going to become monsters.
Yep.
So let's open it up. Let's actually look at your problems and let's do it in a safe way.
Yep.
And let's do it to where you can fully understand yourself so that you can fix those problems. Mm-hmm. So I started diving into why do we all have these similar problems? And what are we actually doing about it, right? Because there are very few people, and they're typically the top CEOs, the Bezos, the Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musks, who say, hey, these are the problems I have, and this is what I'm doing about it.
Right.
The failures are the ones that say, well, there's just a bunch of problems.
Yeah. It's markets, the economy, it's whatever else.
Right. They blame it on an external problem.
Right.
And in my opinion, it's not, I can't do this, it's how can I do this? Mm-hmm. But that all comes down to your psychology and your ability to problem solve. Mm-hmm. So this is a study that was done, I want to say it was 2015, Harvard Business. They go in and they take two groups of people. So let's say there's 100 people. I don't remember how many they did for this study. But they take about, let's say 100 people, and they say, okay, who here considers themselves an entrepreneur? They take half the group.
And was everybody an entrepreneur?
No.
Okay.
No, so it's just a random group of people. And about half the group is entrepreneurs, the other half is normal. And I'm totally paraphrasing the numbers and everything. But they take these people and they have them do the same exact test. And it's like a written exam on how they solve all these problems. And they're doing a brain scan while they're doing these tests. And it turns out that as they're looking at the brain, they realize that the normal people, the non-entrepreneurs, use either a left or a right side. Now, the left side of your brain is logical thinking. Mm-hmm. So critical, logical, math, analytical, math, science, factual. And then the right side of the brain is the creative, the emotional, the inspirational, the artistic. Mm-hmm. You're just expanding, and everything is an option.
Right.
It doesn't have to be factual. It can just be whatever you want. It's more creative and fun. And so they noticed that the non-entrepreneurs were able to use one side or the other. They're either very analytical or they're more creative thinking. Now the entrepreneurs do the same exact test. Again, brain scans being completed, they're watching how the brain lights up. And what the only difference, same exact test results, all pretty similar across the board. It wasn't a complicated test, but the difference was that both sides of the brain light up.
So both sides were lighting up for every problem because they were thinking creatively as they were analyzing.
Exactly. So entrepreneurs, their brain is physically different. They are able to switch between the left and right side of their brain. Interesting.
And that's fascinating because, as I reflect back on my life, I love Penelope, my little 7-year-old. She is doing all these art projects and all this stuff, and I was like, man, I used to love doing art. I used to love doing the creative stuff. I used to play, musical instruments and stuff. And then I stopped doing that because I started doing more business and all that kind of jazz. And I was like, but I that some people behaviorally are either more analytical or more artistic. Mm-hmm. And but I always liked both. I love music. I love concerts. I love that kind of stuff. So it's fascinating. Looking back and trying to reflect on my own personal situation, how much I liked art, and then how I've kind of taken different creative structures on deal analysis and that kind of stuff, which has definitely helped us succeed in business.
Exactly. And think about that. Think about some of the most successful, what's a successful company? Google. Think about how Google attracts both analytical and emotional people. Mm-hmm. Think on the most basic keynotes of Google. The little games they have when you click on the Google logo?
Yep.
That's fun. That's exciting. That's creative. Mm-hmm. So they took a creative element. They took a right side of the brain.
Yep.
But what is Google also known for? Search engine.
Yep.
It's
Very analytical, very data driven.
Exactly. It's easy to use. Anyone can use it. It's convenient, it's quick, it's smart. So it speaks to the masses. So the most successful companies know how to perfectly balance logical and emotional.
Interesting.
So think about who is at the head of those successful companies? Entrepreneurs. And the only reason they succeeded was because they were able to walk the tightrope of the left and the right brain.
Love that. I love it. So when you, all right, so when you sit down and you talk with somebody and you're helping them analyze through this, you're almost doing like an audit on, what they've done in the past, where they are right now, what their goals are in the future. Talk to me about like how you analyze somebody who comes to you and brings that to you.
Oh man, it would scare you.
Really?
The things I do to people. No,
I love it.
I'm a good person, I promise.
Yeah.
So I love reading people, first off. So I will read body language. I will look at how they talk to people. I will look at how they talk to themselves. I will just data gather on every single person I meet in the best of ways, right? I love getting to know people. I love talking to people. And what I like to do is I like to look at what their current problems are, because, it's easier to focus on that so that we can expand from there. Depending on how much work the person wants to do, because it all comes down to them, right? I can't force someone to fix their problems. I just can't. But if I'm talking to a person and they say, "Hey, I suck at communicating with my HR person," and you're like, "Okay, that's really interesting. There's probably a few reasons why," right? So we break it down as far as past, current, and future.
Yep.
So that's a current problem. You think that's a current problem. What I like to do is I like to say, okay, more than likely there was something that happened when you were between the ages of 0 and 3, because that's when your brain develops the most.
Yep, rooted back then.
All your current problems are rooted back to usually between an issue that was between 0 and 3.
Interesting.
Right? Not that you can't create new problems or new psychology or new characteristics past that, but the most development, the most core characteristics, personality traits, beliefs all come from between ages 0 and 3. So if someone says, "Hey, I suck at communicating with my HR person," I think, okay, who told them that? They were bad at communicating between ages 0 and 3.
Yep.
Think about your parents who maybe said something to you like, "Hey, you need to use your words. You're not using your words."
Yep.
If that stuck with a toddler and they make it to age 35, and in their minds, even if they're not consciously acknowledging it, subconsciously their brain is saying, "Well, you don't know how to use your words." So I love breaking people down to the very core. There's different therapy methods that I've actually had to go through. Again, a lot of trauma in my life, so I've gotten to experience this, to say, hey, let's actually go back. Let's revisit this memory. Let's think about the earliest memory where you thought that about yourself.
Right.
So you can do an entire therapy session with someone, and you can do it in a casual way. I love talking to people about that because they don't even realize that the therapy is being done, but then 20 minutes into a conversation, they've found a way to fix that problem.
And so when you identify that memory from 4 years old, 3 years old, 5 years old, how do you change it? You just acknowledge it and say, "Oh, well, maybe that's why, and now that I understand that that's why, it was planted there by an external force or something outside or somebody else, and that's not really who I am, and I can totally change that?"
Essentially. So there's actually a therapy method called the BERT method.
Okay.
I don't remember what the acronym is, but it's pretty much used on like PTSD and trauma survivors.
Okay.
So it's been known to cure PTSD. It's not widely known, but some of the top psychologists and psychiatrists have used it to heal people from PTSD. And essentially what you do is, it can take about 2 hours to get through one of these sessions, depending on how severe it is. But essentially you identify what's hurting that person most in that day, and you go back in time with them, you acknowledge the memory. So you actually ask the person, and I don't do this with most people. I like to do this in like a very safe and secure place. I've done it with people to help them, but casually you can get some key elements on what the actual issue is without diving too deep, right? But in the most intense form, what you would do is you'd go back in time with that person. You'd have them explain the memory. What were you wearing? What did it smell like? Where were you? Who were you with? Have them be fully immersed in that memory. How did that make you feel when you were told this? Who told you that? Did you ever think that again? And essentially we go back and we rewrite the memory in the most positive form. We say, in an ideal situation, what happened? And what that does is the neural pathways that run in our brain are full of memory, right? And a neural pathway, it's like all the little webs that you see when people are talking about the brain.
Yep.
That's what a neural pathway is.
Okay.
And neural pathways store all of our memories, all of the images in our brain, all of the thoughts we've ever had. Whether we acknowledge them, whether we remember them or not, the brain knows everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's been filming since we were born, right? So what we do is we go back to that memory, we go back to that neural pathway, and we say, hey, we're going to change this. This is actually what happened, and we rewrite the story. Now, it takes a lot of brain power to be able to do that.
Right.
And it can take years
Right.
for someone to actually fix something that
Because
severe.
it's been a story in your head for years and years and years, so
Exactly.
you have to rewrite it for years. I've heard some tactics and strategies around like taking that memory that, I don't know, maybe you're ashamed of, or maybe it's a negative memory, or makes you angry, or it's a person specifically, or whatever. And you take that memory, you can think about it, and you like turn it into black and white in your head, like visually, and then you like shrink it and you minimize it, and then you just kind of like squish it or throw it in a garbage can or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's a way to kind of reverse the thought process on some of that stuff.
Exactly. You're actually acknowledging that issue, and you're saying, hey, brain, we really don't need to think about this anymore.
right.
That's great that you are, right? Like, that's a defense mechanism. You don't want to be a poor communicator, but guess what? You're not. Let's say that conversation never happened, or it happened differently.
Mm-hmm.
And there's different ways.
It was meant in a different manner
Sure.
than how you received it, maybe.
Sure. So it's fully opening that up and acknowledging it. The reason I think why it's not widely known or widely practiced is because it's a very intense therapy session. I've done it a few times with, I had an amazing therapist who helped me with some PTSD, and we did this 2-hour session, and I think I went home and slept like during the day for about 8 hours.
Wow.
And then I slept again at night. It does so much to your brain. Your brain has to do so much work to resolve that issue. The amazing part about that is that when you actually resolve that, everything subsequent, everything that's happened after is also resolved, because we got to the core issue.
Interesting.
It's incredible. The science behind it is incredible.
Wow.
So I've done this with people, with business owners, even with friends who are in sales, who are like, hey, I don't think I'm a good salesperson, or hey, I'm a poor communicator. And we've gone back, and I haven't done a long 2-hour session with someone because it's so intense. And they're like, hey, I don't have time. I got to go do sales, or I got to get to this meeting, whatever it is, right? And I'm like, hey, let me help you with that. Let's actually work on this. And we go back, we fix it, everything works out that day. That issue, not an issue anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So if somebody's watching this, like how can they, what tools are out there? What opportunities, who should they talk to? What are the options that they have to start working on some of those things?
Oh, there's so many. I'm so glad you asked. So, and we're going to dive deeper into that tomorrow. We go into depth about all the tools in the masterclass, yeah. And what I like to look at is what are the mental tools we're using, right? It all starts with our daily habits. If you've ever read Atomic Habits by James Clear, he talks about how important it is to start very, very small, start chipping away, because that's what leads to the bigger result. So, I mean, even something as simple as using blue light glasses, because, and I'll like that's a very brief example, but on the most basics, if you use blue light glasses, your brain's going to be less fatigued, and you're going to have a greater ability to work through a problem. So when we're talking about physical tools,
because the light, that blue light blocking glasses. So
blue light blocking glasses, like all of our screens, fatigue the brain. We're not meant to intake blue light.
Right. And so there's so much blue light, so you wear the blue light blocking glasses. we talked a little bit about this with Ben Azadi when he was on, and he wears them all the time. He has daytime ones and then he has nighttime ones.
Okay.
And I don't know what there's a little bit of a difference, but I can't remember what the website was that he used. But check out Ben Azadi's. I think there's a link to it or something in there. But you know what you don't think about? You think like, oh well, I want to be able to go to sleep at night, and the blue light keeps me up a little bit later, right? Like these fluorescent lights and stuff. They have blue light, and the screens have blue light, and it keeps you awake a little bit later. And you think, oh well, I want to be able to go to sleep. But even deeper than that is that your brain is working too hard, and it can't work harder in the next day or whatever, because it's got all this blue light, right?
Exactly.
And it's fatiguing the brain, so it can't operate at its highest level.
Exactly. And that's just one basic tool, right? So we have physical tools that we use, and that can be nutrition, exercise, even things like I recommend doing Sudoku or getting off of social media,
Doing like
stop
some puzzles,
scrolling.
right?
Yeah, doing puzzles, activate different parts of the brain, do memory exercises, right? Be willing to acknowledge your memory, everything that's ever happened to you. If you need it, like therapy, finding a good therapist is so hard. Have you ever gone to therapy?
I have, yes. I had a virtual therapist who did like a virtual thing with me, and it was like, I don't know.
Did you like therapy?
Just being able to, but I like being able to talk to somebody
Yeah.
with zero judgment, right? Especially like, not that I'm not 100% open, but like, I don't know, there's certain things that maybe I can't talk about because I have investors in a deal, and it could adversely affect those investors in order for me to openly talk about what's going on with that deal, even if I talk about it on, like with my team or whatever. And I definitely, can't talk about it on social media until that deal is over.
Right. You're like, I need this to stay in this room only.
But I'm dealing with problems now. I need
Yeah.
to talk to somebody now
Yeah.
about that. And so I've had, sitting down talking to a psychologist or a therapist, something along those lines has been, I don't do it on a regular basis, but every time I have done it is like, it just I don't know, gets it off your chest.
Exactly.
It feels like so much weight is off your shoulder, and having that external view when you're not there in the weeds, in the corn maze, trying to figure out, like, you need somebody to tell you which direction to go, and that's such a help.
Yep, exactly. And that you bring up a good point. It's like therapists who tell you where to go is great, but what about therapists who say, well, where have you been? Mm-hmm. Where have you been this whole time?
Yep.
What's happened up in here? Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of therapists. I'm not ashamed to say that. It's not my fault. No, but I've dealt with a lot of different therapists, because as soon as they refuse to acknowledge that I've had any PTSD or problems in my past, I say, okay, no offense, you're just not the right person for me. I need someone who's going to help me fix what happened when I was 2 years old.
Yep.
I'd say maybe 20% of therapists are actually aware that you have to go back in your brain, you have to work on the neural pathways.
Wow.
It's not
I would hope that more would be open to it and understanding of
I think
more historic
Sorry, go ahead.
experiences.
Yeah. I think they're taught about it. I don't think they understand the importance of it. Mm-hmm. So many of us think, oh, if I have a problem today, it's because of something that happened today. Mm-hmm. That's never the case.
Interesting.
And scientifically, it's proven that if you go back in time, if you actually look at what's happened in the past, you will solve everything that's current and everything that's in the future. It just riddles together.
So, like, how do you find a therapist? If I wanted a therapist
Google.
for business, if I had a therapist for relationships, I want to find a therapist to be a better parent. Like, you just Google what?
It's actually been, I think it's been by chance that I've found good therapists. And like I said, I've been to several. I think I've been to like 6 or 7. And only 2 of them have been willing to acknowledge a past, right? Mm-hmm. I think looking into PTSD and trauma specialists are huge, because they
What if I don't know if I
understand.
have like PTSD? Like, I don't know. I feel like I had a pretty good childhood, but there's probably things that are messed up that I'm not acknowledging, or just like, I'm usually the guy who, like, when something happens to me, I just like push it down, right? And I'll deal with it later.
Right.
Or just muscle through it, kind of a thing. That's usually my jam. And so I'm sure there's probably something out there, but I've probably blocked it out so hard that I haven't acknowledged it,
Sure. Everyone has trauma.
Yeah.
Every single person ever has trauma. not everyone will acknowledge that
Right.
because that's painful. We don't want to say we have trauma.
Yeah.
We don't want to say we've ever been hurt. But if you had something horrible happen to you when you were a toddler and it never got resolved, wouldn't you want to know about it?
Mm-hmm.
So finding therapists who actually acknowledge trauma and who are there to do trauma work and PTSD, I think those will get you much further than a generic therapist.
Mm-hmm.
So therapy is a big one.
Yeah.
Reading books about your psychology, even your personality type, being willing to meditate and journal. I have friends who meditate for days at a time.
Can you recommend a couple of books on personality behavioral assessment or psychology? Things that have been...
There's so many. I would say Think and Grow Rich. It's a little bit intense for some people just because the ideas behind it are astronomical as far as everything you think actually happens.
Right.
And I think tying the past, the current, and the future together is a very difficult concept for people. So you have to be open to that idea. But I would say Think and Grow Rich, You Are a Badass by Jensen Shiro
Okay.
is an incredible book.
I've read it.
Oh, it's so good. It talks about our psychology. It talks about everything that's ever happened to us. It breaks us down on an energetic level, like on an energy molecule level.
Love that.
And like the psychology behind why you are the way that you are and the fact that you are a badass. It sounds like it'd be a motivational book, like you are a badass, you've got this. It's
Yeah.
not. It's all about like, hey, you're a little fucked up. Let's work on that.
Yeah. And I think that's so, it's critical to understand that. Like, and even now, realizing that, I don't know, I think a little bit differently than most of the population. Like, I don't know, like, hey guys, we're entrepreneurs, all right? It's a little bit, we're the weird ones, right? Like, we're the psychos, right? Because we're the different ones.
Yep.
And so, but that's cool, that's unique, that's, society has kind of like downplayed being different. And I like that it's kind of more mainstream and cool to be different now. And it allows people to kind of get out of their shell and just be who they are without having to worry as much about being judged on a lot of that kind of stuff. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think how to win friends and influence people.
I love that.
That creates awareness,
For
right?
sure.
Like that book to me created so much awareness of like, oh my gosh, it's not about me, right? And every conversation that I've tried to make about me should be about the other person and should be about showing genuine interest. And you're right, nobody gives a shit if you complain, condemn, or criticize. Like that is all negative stuff and can only paint you in a bad light. And so things like that create a lot of emotional, personal, social awareness. That was a big book that made a big impact for me.
If you liked that, The Like Switch is another good one.
The Like Switch?
Yep, I'll send it to you. I can't remember the author's name. He's like an ex-FBI agent, a retired FBI agent. Talks all about being genuine but being liked. Incredible book. You'd like that one.
I like that. I like it.
Another one, The Color Code book, talks about personality traits and types. Talks about why we have certain personalities. Comes down again, ages between 0 and 3. The parents you grew up around, your environment, all that kind of stuff.
As you mentioned the behavioral stuff, I'm thinking of like DISC assessments. Like you can just
DISC is a
search
good one.
DISC assessment, or there's strengths finders, there's predictive index, there's a whole bunch of them, and some of them are free online.
The Myers-Briggs test is another
Myers-Briggs,
one.
you're right. And some of them are more behavioral based and some of them are more personality based. I think take them all and just kind of take them in different settings too. Like do it when you're just relaxed on the weekend, do it when you're in more of a work environment, maybe a little bit stressed out, and see how that changes of how you do that. And then not only for you, but like I had my wife do it, right? I had my team do it. And now I understand their behavioral traits and how they respond better to certain conversations and not to other things, right? Some people don't like hey, I need you to get the shit done. Like now's time to, like they need that softened a little bit. Other people respond better to, hey, let's go light the world on fire. Let's go break records and let's go do that. Other people are more fun based and they want to have fun while they do that. Other people maybe don't want to break records. They want to make a difference, right? They want to make an impact. They want to help other people. They care more about support than anything else. And then others, are very analytical. So you figure out who's who you are, and then how to interact with people, and you can kind of put them in, I don't want to say put them in a box, but like understand their behaviors when you're interacting with them, and then as you interact with them, understand how better to interact with them, and how better to communicate with them, and how better to get your point across, or get them to join the team and link arms and accomplish things together. Like, I think it's really, really important. And again, it goes back to that awareness piece.
Oh yeah, because you have to, if you're actually building a team, you have to understand it has nothing to do with you and everything to do with your ability to bring people together. Because all of us have weaknesses and strengths, right? And you just have to acknowledge that. Some people will say, no, I'm amazing, I could do anything I want. Well, yeah, technically, but what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And are you willing to bring someone into the picture who fits the inverse of that?
Right.
Who your strengths might be their weaknesses and your weaknesses are their strengths.
It's most of my team, right? Like, there's some of us who are really good at the marketing side or sales side, and there's some of us that are really good at the data and the analytics, and there's a couple people who are really good at more the just operations and getting things done on a day-to-day, like high urgency type tasks and responsibilities. And very few are good at all of it, right? And so making sure that you have people who fit each of those behavioral types, because as you build a business, you need all of those,
Absolutely.
And I think that's it's really again important. It all comes down to awareness. It all comes down to understanding and accepting that there's certain things that you might be able to do, but maybe not at the highest level, or it's not the highest and best use of your behaviors and your personality and what your talents and skills are. You know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And as we dive deeper into this tomorrow with the masterclass, you're going to learn that you do have these personality types, and you do have these different practices you can do, these different habits you create, everything to do with your past. When we talk about things on on an energy level, right? We're talking about like the energy molecules scientifically that are all around everything. So when you're talking about building a team, you're going to match with certain vibrational frequencies because of where you're at, mentally, emotionally, physically. You're going to get along better with certain people than with others. And yeah, personality types kind of contribute to that. But overall, it's what's going on in here? What am I dealing with today? And how is that being taken by other people?
I think you hit on this, because it's like a lot of the mindset stuff and a lot of the psychology stuff and a lot of the awareness stuff and a lot of that seems like it's ethereal and it's like doesn't have anything concrete to it.
Oh, it does.
But the reality is, as you go down that path and as you learn more about it, everything is scientifically backed up. Everything has actual figures, actual numbers, actual science behind why it works, why it doesn't work, the energy levels and the movement of the molecules and all these different things and the vibrating frequencies and all this stuff that can be tested and proven on a scientific level to support a lot of these things that seem like they're fluff in the sky. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that to me, like going down that path and realizing, again, the artsy side of things and oh hey, I like the ethereal, I like the mindset stuff, but then also the other side of my brain that's like, give me some factual.
I need some facts behind this. Back it up.
And then merging those two together really opens you up. So we've gone for a long time. I want to kind of close out with, let's talk a little bit about like goal setting. How can people better achieve future results, right? And talk just real briefly about that.
Absolutely.
They're sitting down and say, hey, listen, I want to accomplish this or that, or like maybe they don't know what that looks like. How do you help people set goals?
Absolutely. So, we've talked about our past. We've talked about the PTSD, the trauma. It all starts with that, right? So once we figure out what our issues are, why we have a bad day, we can understand ourselves better. I say, okay, we need to, now that we've acknowledged all these issues, we understand this energy, we understand at the core what's going on, the vibrational frequencies we're giving off, and what we're allowing in. How do we contribute that past, right? What are we actually looking at for the future? So I love asking people, like, what are your goals? And they tell me this, and I'm like, okay, well, why? And we break down why. And either it's a PTSD thing, like they don't feel like they were good enough, so they need to do something, or they're aware enough to say, well, I know that I want to be at this energy level. I know that I want to be with this group of people. I know I want to accomplish this, and so I'm going to do everything I can to get there. and they elevate themselves and they spend time with people and things that elevate them and who they elevate. So I think when you're aware of where you're at on a very basic level, like where are you actually fitting at with the world, with all these goals that could ever exist, what are you trying to achieve? Because if you want to, like something I'll tell someone is, you know, if you want to flip houses, what, you want to flip 5 houses? Great. You want to do mediocre renovations? That's going to get you mediocre results for 5 mediocre families. So if you just have these very basic goals, because that's all you've ever allowed yourself to think, that's all you'll ever accomplish, right? But if you say, well, I'm going to completely reorganize this entire subdivision or this entire community, or I'm going to build this new city, you're going to accomplish whatever you think you can, right? It's all, like you talked about the law of attraction. Everything you think that you can be, you will be. I think, therefore I am. Like that's a saying for a reason, right? So when I talk to people about goal setting, I like to think about like, how big are we looking? Because you could look at one glass ceiling, maybe there's 10 of them you need to break through. But you need to understand why, and you need to understand what. What are we actually breaking through and why? And once we understand that, we'll get to the how.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the reason people aren't thinking bigger is because there's like this fear of what comes with what's bigger. I don't know what that is, or it's a fear that is set in from a younger age of like, you know, money is evil, right? It's the root of all evil, or dirty money, filthy money. You touched money, go wash your hands because it's dirty, you know. Like, and there's all these little things like, oh, that guy's driving a fancy car. He must be an asshole. I wonder who he ripped off, you know. And it's like all these things that were rooted in childhood comments from parents or neighbors or friends and family and people that you respect and you love. It's like, well, I want to achieve big results, but maybe I don't want to achieve big results, or I'm self-sabotaging because of these other things that are in my head because of past things. And so like acknowledging that and acknowledging why you think about that. And Mark Evans, a good friend of mine, calls it
Mark Evans.
Thought auditing.
Yes.
You know, and so he's like, well, why? Am I thinking that thought, right? And he's auditing his thoughts all the time. And again, it goes back to that whole awareness. It comes back to understanding, you know, why you believe what you believe and what that's going to do to set you up or hold you back from achieving big things in the future.
You have to look at both spectrums. You have to look at what's pulling you down, but more than that, once you cut back what's pulling you down, well, that would keep you stagnant. You have to look at what can pull you up, but you have to be willing to look at, well, how far up can we go? And once you get there, once you understand how far you want to take something, whether that's a goal, whether that's I guess just a goal in general. Once you understand what that goal is, okay, how do I actually climb that ladder? I don't want to stay where I'm at. I don't want to be looking out. I want to be looking up, and then I want to climb up. So understanding everything that's above you and doing your best to elevate towards that.
Yep. I love it. Well, I'm excited to check out the masterclass.
Yes.
I'm excited to dive deep.
I'm so excited.
I appreciate all the insights and the awareness that you brought during this. And so I'm pumped up. If you're not part of Legacy Wealth Academy, it's $9 a month. So check that out. Bobby's course will be live in a couple of months, and she'll be diving deep into all these different thoughts and all these different principles. So appreciate you guys being here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much,
Always
Tim.
fun. And we'll see you guys on the next episode of Spilling the Beans.
Hey, hopefully you got a ton of value out of that. If you got some good insights, I'd love to hear it in the comments section. Please share this with somebody who might get some value out of it. And if you would do me a favor, just give me a like on the video, and make sure you're subscribed to the Legacy Wealth channel. We're always trying to provide great value, insights to help you out with your entrepreneurial journey, building up some wealth, your personal finances, and obviously real estate as well. So appreciate you. See you on the next episode of Spilling the Beans.